ready to start, please. We're going to call the meeting to order, please.
This meeting is being held in accordance with the schedule of meetings adopted at the organizational meeting held January 4th, 2023. Adequate notices of this regular meeting of the Kenilworth Board of Education has been provided to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and local source on January 12th, 2023. A copy has been filed with the Kenilworth Borough Clerk, posted in the Board Office, Kenilworth Borough Hall, Burley, and Harding Schools, as is provided by the Open Public Meetings Act. Notice of this meeting and the advertised section of the 2023-24 school budget was published in the April 13th, 2023 edition of the local source. The purpose of this evening's meeting is to present the 2023-24 annual school budget to the community and adopt the budget, award construction projects, and approve other regular agenda items. Designs will be presented for the Burley and Middle School, High School addition and alteration.
Thank you, Mr. Ganella. Can you please rise and join us in the salute to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Ganella, roll call, please.
Biner. Here. David. Here. Drogan. Ferrara.
Here.
Habather.
Here.
Ladati. Here. Panici.
Here.
Tiers. Here. Zimmerman.
Here.
We have quorum.
Okay, thank you. At this point, we would like to open the meeting to public. Is there a motion to open the meeting to the public?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, motion made by Mr. David.
Actually, later.
You have it here for, you want to do it now, or you want to do the presentation? I thought you wanted to do it
Presentations.
first based on that.
Yeah, no.
Okay, sorry, my fault. I thought you
Yeah,
wanted to.
the purpose of the presentations, and then, yeah, 2 is the presentations. And then public. It's okay.
Yeah, I thought maybe we're moving it to the front.
Yeah,
Anybody
yeah,
wanted to
no.
do it, so they didn't have to say.
No one has any comments, no one had any comments about the budget. All right, so yeah, we'll do the presentations first, okay? All right.
Could be a strategy.
So, good evening, everyone. It's an honor to present the budget to you this evening. This is the third and final public budget presentation outlining the 2023-24 annual school budget for the Kenilworth School District. The first presentation that we did back in March focused on the expenditure phase 1 leadership team budgets. The second one, we reviewed in depth the technical side of the budget, focusing on the technical requirements for submitting a budget to the, for approval to the Executive County Superintendent, as well as the revenue state aid, phase 2 salaries, and phase 3 school business administrator documentation and expenditures. This presentation this evening will be cumulative and review the other presentations, as well as reviewing the tax impact and tax rates, and looking forward to the challenges in the 2023-24 school year. The presentation will highlight some of the more relevant aspects of the budget and focus on the overall impact and a broader overview of the budget. In addition to these public meetings and presentations and discussions, multiple committee meetings, multiple committees work tirelessly putting the budget together to allow us to present it this evening. I would like to thank all the members involved in the process, especially Mr. Ladati in the Finance Committee and Mr. Habather in the Personnel Committee for their time and commitment to the process. So tonight, we will be focusing on, as I said, budget goals and projects and priorities, budget status, a review of expenditures and revenues, getting some of the technical aspects such as bank capped, reserves, tax levy, and tax rates. I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Arlington, who will talk about the next couple slides.
Yeah, thank you. Each year, our budget goals serve as the starting point for the entire budget process, including the beginning stages of assessing needs and wants. To Mr. Ganella's final presentation tonight. By foregrounding these 5 budget goals, we've worked to ensure our budget serves as a financial blueprint that continues prioritizing our students in academically, socially, and developmentally appropriate school experiences, and providing for children all they deserve from their school district. Zooming in here a bit on our budget goals. Our school budget circulates around prioritizing the components of school that we believe will most greatly impact curriculum, instruction, and achievement. Besides starting from a zero base, no curriculum, athletic, or co-curricular activities were cut. Rather, several efforts were added in this area. As always, our budget and its goals cohere around our 5 district goals, all with an eye on being mindful of the tax impact. Next slide, yeah. When the leadership team presented to the board a few weeks ago, you learned more about their school building or department needs. Here's a snapshot of the highlights from those presentations. Across the 4 areas I chose to highlight tonight, Harding School, Brearley Middle High School, Special Ed, and C&I, you'll see several common themes. Essentially, these themes equate to priority focuses for us. That is, continuation of literacy efforts across grade levels, expanded innovation, and sustained support for students' socio-emotional and mental health, reflective of the post-pandemic moment in which we live. Personally, I'm very excited to lead the efforts that this budget makes space for, and I'm glad that this budget equips us with the human, more than human, and material resources we need to do right by kids. At this time, Mr. Ganello will share more about the budget's details.
So first we'll begin with some of the revenues and expenditures and talk a little bit about the challenges that we had putting together the budget. At our previous meetings, we discussed several of these concerns and challenges. Every year we face challenges. This year, from a budgetary perspective, they were much more complex and some of them were difficult to overcome. I still remain concerned with the impact that the restrictive tax levy cap will have on programs in the not too distant future. So some of those specific challenges that we've previously discussed was insurance, how the property casualty, especially side of the ledger, has impacted it. We all know that insurance companies are challenged with all the recent events of natural disasters, wildfires, hurricanes, so on and so forth. That doesn't necessarily impact our insurance company, but it does affect the reinsurers. And the reinsurers are what sometimes drives these rates to increase substantially. Another challenging area is SEL, or social emotional learning, mental health needs of students. A lot of that has to do with COVID, but a lot of it just has to do with growing up as a kid, I guess, today in the 21st century. COVID learning loss is still something that we're taking a look at and trying to combat. Transportation, we discussed that at our last meeting, how our route costs are up almost 40%. That has a lot to do with fuel costs as well as driver shortages, but also a little bit to do with the fact that those bus companies, some of them were out of work for over a year during COVID. So I think they're trying to recoup some of those costs and losses that they had during those years. Employee benefits continue to be a challenge, and pension costs, specifically the PERS pension rates, are continuing to increase. Overall, inflation is a challenge. The fact that it's at about 7%, which is lower than it was this previous year, but it's still a challenge when you're juxtaposing that to a 2% tax levy cap. Energy costs, we all know what's going on in the world with that. The impact of the solar did probably help us. We've got to do a little more investigation to see, but the overall increases in natural gas and electricity probably offset some of those savings that we were anticipating or projecting them when we put those solar arrays on our roofs a couple years ago. And that's in general shipping costs and supply chain concerns. You hear that on the news, that really is a reality. We also talked at the March 13th meeting about the loss of equalization aid, that we were anticipating a large increase, but we actually got a decrease. We did recoup some of that. There's a resolution on this evening's agenda that will address that, and I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. And then finally, banked cap, the fact that we don't have any bank cap, the fact that we're using reserves, and how that will impact us in the future are all concerns and challenges that we had when we were putting this budget together. The expenditure, this is a picture of our expenditures. As discussed, the increase from year to year is a bit deceiving, and gives the impression that we significantly increase programs. This is rather simply an accounting procedure that requires that the transfer of funds from capital reserve to debt service needed to be accounted for twice, once in the general fund and then again in the debt service fund. If you were to remove that transfer between the funds of 1.5 million from the calculus, the resulting general fund increase would be 3.55%, and the overall increase would be 7.97%. So what I like to do is to make it a little clearer for us all is to take a look at it as a budget phase situation. Looking at it this way, you could see some of those increases without those prior year adjustments and those accounting maneuvers. Since the original budget reviewed in January, Phase 1 budget was reduced by almost $104,000. Remember, the Phase 1 budget is the piece of the budget that is supplies, materials, equipment, and services directly related to the educational program. Phase 3 challenges, we already talked about some of the challenges there and why that has increased significantly. If we were to remove, however, from that line in the Phase 3, which is up about 18.59%, if we were to remove the debt service increases from that figure, the increase would be only $678,000 versus the 2.2 million there, or 5.72% versus the 18.59% there that you could see there. Considering that 687,000 of that increase was for health benefits and transportation alone, you can see that all the other lines that incorporated in the school business administrator's documentation section, we either held a line or reduced a line, lines in those areas. So that all phase total there of 9.85, if it was adjusted to take out that debt service component there, it would be 4.75% increase. Another way to look at expenditures is programmatically. To summarize the expenditure side of the budget graphically, I like to use this to demonstrate where the money is going. So here you can see that Harding's about 22%, Brearley's 25%, special ed is 24%, athletics is 2.2%, undistributed is 13%, and benefits is about 14%. When I was practicing early, I realized I really should next year really break out that undistributed programs and split it into two pieces of pie, so to speak. One for undistributed includes there. It includes central administration, information technology, and debt service. I should really break out the debt service since debt service is so significant now, and show just central administration and information technology as one piece of the pie, and then debt service as another piece of the pie. So we'll take care of that for next year's budget. On the revenue side, you can see that we're required by state law to have a balanced budget, so our revenues must equal our expenditures. Several items to note here is included is the decrease in equalization aid and the increase in choice aid, an increase in the withdrawal of capital reserve for construction projects, and a significant increase in the budgeted fund balance or surplus. Overall revenues have increased due to the same accounting procedure that we talked about earlier regarding the transfer of funds from capital reserve to debt service. So let's talk a little bit about state aid. As we previously discussed, equalization aid calculation is very complex. And though we know the calculation, we're not sure why some of the factors changed. We still aren't sure why some of those factors changed. What we do know is that because the increase in the equalized property valuation, that had a direct impact on our local share calculation, which impacted our adequacy comparison, our state aid differential calculation, and ultimately our tax rate. Long story short, the calculation reduced our equalization aid and raised our local share, which reduced our aid. What we're still not sure of is why our equalized property taxation, tax valuation went from 1.7 billion to 2.1 billion, which is a $360 billion increase in 1 year. So a little bit of good news, we weren't the only district that happened to this year. Apparently it happened to quite a few districts. And as a result of some lobbying, I guess legislatures put together a package to increase supplemental stabilization aid, which the Assembly and the Senate and the governor all passed on April 3rd. And that provided us an additional $66,628 of stabilization aid, which is considered unrestricted aid. There's a resolution on this evening's agenda, number 2, to approve the submission of that, I don't want to call it grant, but accepting that aid. We have to specifically state what the use of it is. And our use would be to expand security services in the schools to ensure that a SLEO, or special law enforcement officer, is in both Harding and Brearley in connection in addition to the SRO. Our rationale there is that the SRO is a valued member of our staff, but their duties are not solely security. So they have a lot more responsibilities than just making sure that the building is secure. So we feel that Brearley needs a SLEO as much as Harding does, so this will provide that service to Brearley as well. Tax levy cap. The calculation is relatively simple. You take your previous tax levy, increase it by 2%. That's how you get your base tax levy. Then there are allowable adjustments. We were eligible for an adjustment for healthcare costs of $197,000, which we applied for and received, and that increased our final tax levy cap to $22,296,335. A little bit about use of bank cap. Bank cap is a method to allow school districts that has not been granted approval to exceed the tax levy cap by a separate proposal to bank the unused tax levy for use in any of the next 3 succeeding budget years. In accordance with code, a district can request use bank only after it has fully exhausted all eligible statutory spending authority in the budget year. Please note that we have not generated any bank cap in the past 3 years, and short of any monumental shift in how state aid is distributed, I don't anticipate that we will be able to generate much bank cap in the foreseeable future. In fact, some districts, I know Westfield, and specifically Westfield, was so concerned about the cap, the 2% cap, that they moved their election from the November back to an April election, which allows them to go out to a vote to exceed the 2% cap. So that's going to be probably a trend for some districts. Recapitulation of balances. There's several categories of balances that make up the recapitulation, each category having a specific requirement of how the money can be used, how they're accumulated, and what the maximum levels are. The first is to review is unassigned free balance. Our current proposals call for appropriating $1,208,000 to reduce the tax levy. The state allowed districts to increase their free balance from 2% of their budgets to 4% of their budgets during the COVID years. On the onset of COVID, there were a lot of unknowns regarding the financial impacts of COVID. So we, as well as many other districts, took advantage of that adjustment to 4%. However, we really never needed those funds, especially with the infusion of federal funds such as CARES and ESSER that covered most of the costs that were associated with the operational components of operating the school district through COVID. But now, since COVID is over, we're required to reduce our surplus from the 4% back down to the 2% rate. And that's why we're appropriating a larger than normal amount. Capital reserve, we will appropriate $200,000 for the pole barn storage unit. In addition, we're transferring $1,525,000 from capital reserve to debt service to pay the FY24 debt service payment for the referendum projects. In FY25, another $475,000 will be used to reduce the debt service. This conforms with the board's original commitment to use $2 million from capital reserve towards the referendum. Maintenance reserve, there's no appropriation this year. And emergency reserve, there's no appropriation this year. So summarizing our reserves, you can see here what we're utilizing this year that has an impact on our tax levy. I've talked often over the years about our need to break our reliance on the use of free balance to reduce the tax levy. The reality is that we don't have an ability to do a true long-range budgeting or projections because of the constant changing of state aid and other budgetary conditions that are sometimes out of our control. Overuse of reserves to reduce the tax levy can distort the actual needs of the district and impact the cap, educational programs, and taxpayers in the future. There's a fine balance that needs to be maintained between the cap, the tax levy, the use of reserves, and maintaining those educational programs. We need to engage our legislators to get them to understand that we are on a financial cliff and we're really getting close to falling off it. The 2% budget cap is not sustainable. Chapter 78 restructured how state aid is calculated. For the past several years, we've been benefiting from that and seeing increases in our aid. This year, that shifted. And I have been concerned about this day coming for several years. Maintaining and even expanding programs while state aid is increasing is doable. But once that well dries up, it's not. Our reserves are not always going to be there in the future to bail us out. It just isn't good fiscal policy to do so and is not sustainable over time. There needs to be more recognition in the cap levy calculations to grant adjustments for increased costs other than health benefits, transportation, mental health costs, post-COVID educational costs, all should be considered as allowable adjustments. With general costs rising 7% due to inflation, supply chain costs adding to the bottom line, labor costs increasing in excess of 3%, transportation costs 40%, energy costs in double digits, and this all creates an unrealistic picture for school districts to stay in general, to stay below that 2% tax levy cap. I understand why back in 2010 that was imposed, but it's kind of run its course. And without acknowledgement of these budgetary constraints and concerns, without allowable cap adjustments, many of the programs that we cherish and consider critical will be eliminated. It's just a matter of time, so we need to be proactive and get our legislators involved. That's my soapbox moment. Calculating the tax levy. It's a very basic calculation. You take your total budget and then you start deducting anything any revenue source that you have other than your tax levy. So you take your total budget, you take out your free balance or your reserves, your tuition. In our particular case, we have tuition revenue from Winfield as our send and receive, miscellaneous revenues such as interest income or building rental, your state aids, your choice aid, your federal aid, and then finally your debt service. And you take all those deductions, and that's how you come up with your tax levy of $22,295,781. The resulting tax impact is, on the current expense side, $139.45 on an average home assessed at $183,400. Debt service is actually a decrease this year of $53.20, for a total tax increase of $86.24. Our tax rate is increasing by 1.55% overall. So that concludes the budget piece of my presentation. Are there any questions regarding that? No?
I just have one. I was looking at the advertised enrollments page, and we have, on the sent to other districts regular, we had 0 in 2021, 0 2022, but estimated 20 for 2023. That's a big jump. I don't know if it's a typo,
I don't think that's right.
and it's in more than one place in the documents.
The county superintendent or county business administrator made us change how, there are 3 classifications of where you can send students.
Right.
One of them was county special services, and the other one is regular schools.
Right.
So for the past 20 years, we've been putting them in county special services, such as Educational Services Commission or Marshall Jointure, and they switched it, he told us to switch it this year, so just complying with what he required us to do.
Okay, so then those 20 are somewhere else in here?
Now,
Or they're not?
they were these, here and here. If
Okay.
you look here, these numbers are kind of consistent.
These, the 22
These
is
are the
going up to
total received,
29.
Right,
11 is going to 10,
and right.
and 0 is going to 20. So that's still 20 extra
Yeah,
kids appearing out of somewhere.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that. I know that's what it is, though.
Okay.
I'll have to get back to you on that. See where it flows from.
Anybody else, questions,
So
concerns?
I guess the only question I have for Vince is, you know, when you did your little spiel, is your organization doing anything about this 2% cap? I mean, are they doing any lobbying
We are
with
actually
the?
on a committee to work on some of that, but we're low fish in that totem pole. We're low fish in that tank, so to speak. You know, it's, you guys are the constituents of these legislators. Like Kyle and I are meeting next week, is it this week we're meeting with them? This Friday, we're meeting with Assemblyman Atkins. And I'm gonna bring up these things, and hopefully he'll have something, you know, sometimes they just don't know that these things are happening. We just sometimes have to bring it to their attention. But you, as school boards, needs to do a better job with it than really my association. That's my opinion. Because school boards are voting people. Business administrators aren't voting people. So, and legislators listen to voting people. Right?
The fact that the state put up another $100 million, of which we got to 66,000, I think the school districts are finally sending a message to Trenton that we need more state aid.
Right. Or it needs to be redistributed properly, differently, you know? Was I telling you about the differentials in, if you take a look at the last edition of the newspaper if you guys get any of the local source or anything like that, all our budgets are in there. And if you look at, just pick certain districts, I'm not gonna name names, but you look at their overall budget, like our budget is $34 million, and we have a $22 million tax levy, okay? There's some districts who have hundreds, $200 million budget with a $30 million tax levy.
Does that start with an E?
Well, yeah, I'm not saying.
Be careful.
But
Okay,
it's about the redistribution of that and how it's applied, that I totally find fascinating. And it's not just about taxpayers, it's just about the overall, because the tax levy impacts not only you as homeowners, but businesses as well. So they pay taxes, they pay real estate taxes as well. And you can't tell me, and in some of these large districts, that those businesses can't afford more of the fair share that goes towards that. So maybe that's where the differential has to be, that, okay, residential property taxes can be capped, but you know what, some of these corporations that are taking advantage of that, they're not paying any property taxes to support the schools that are happening in their communities. So, any other questions?
Anybody else?
No,
Questions?
there's no questions. I just want to thank Ms. Spiner, Mr. Haberther, and Mr. David on the Finance Committee for all the work we all put into this budget. I mean, it's not easy. It's not easy to get in front of administrators, professional educators, and question, what they want, what they want, programs they want, and say yes. Sometimes we say no. The extra cost of transportation, food, gas, everything else, salaries. So it's not easy putting these budgets together every year, and they seem to be getting harder. And I think we did a great, over the last 3 years, if you think about it, we have a 2%. I think we've kept it under 1.5 over the last 3 years on average. So I think, I'm just saying that the Finance Committee has done a great job, along with obviously Mr. Ganella and Mr. Arlington, the administrators. But on behalf, I know I'm recommending that you guys approve this budget. I think we've gone through with a fine-tooth comb and got it down as far as we could, keeping that fine balance between the needs of the district, the students, and the taxpayers. Again, as Chair of the Finance Committee, we're recommending that the budget be approved as stated by Mr. Ganella.
Thank you, Mr. Ladani.
Okay, shifting gears to facilities, I'd like to update the board on some of the progress that we've made on the design of the additions to Burley. And this will focus on those additions, not necessarily all the alterations, but the additions. There is a resolution on tonight's agenda to submit the schematic, the final plans to the Department of Education. So I thought this would be an opportune time for us to discuss this. Feel free to jump in at any time during this part. I have here this evening Scott Mahalik and Roxanne Santangelo and Justin Connolly. Roxanne and Scott are from SSB, and Justin's obviously our supervisors of buildings and grounds here in Kenilworth. So, proceeding, this here is the site plan of where the bulk of the additions are going to be. The one section will house the high school science labs and classrooms on the first floor, and the expansion of the middle school on the second floor. And in addition, there will be alterations to existing rooms on the second floor to increase the number of classrooms available when the sixth grade moves over from Harding in the fall of 2025. That's what's on the right section of the building of the plan in gray. That is the new addition there. The other addition will be in the area near the parking lot where the auxiliary gym and the main gym meet. This addition will be a lobby entrance for the school, and though not the main entrance, this will be where staff and students enter the building at the beginning of the day, where guests enter the building for athletic events, in the gyms, and events held in the auditorium and cafeteria. You will also note that the junior varsity soccer field and the access loop in front of the building there are also displayed there. And this evening's presentation will focus on these additions and our design efforts to date. Second slide, you can see here that this is the middle school cafeteria. Thank you, Bob. And the parking lot lobby, we haven't really been able to figure out what we're calling it, whether we're calling the middle school gym cafeteria or a multi-purpose room, but I'll use them interchangeably tonight. The current auxiliary gym will transform into a multi-purpose room space for the middle school, while still being available for use after school by athletic teams and the recreation department. The space during the day will be a gathering area for middle school students as they arrive to school, where they take physical education classes, and where they eat lunch. We even envision this space being able to be used for certain assemblies. The features include storage for the cafeteria tables while gym class is being conducted, bleachers for morning assemblies, general assemblies, and athletic events, a middle school-sized basketball court, the batting cage will remain, and serving area for food, serving area for the food, but the food will still be cooked in the Brearley main cafeteria. Next, we're zooming in on the parking lot lobby entrance. This plan is for the area to be a main entrance for staff and students in the morning. They currently go through this area, just that one little door. It's kind of unceremonial. The middle school students would enter and go into the multi-purpose room on the left side, and the high school students would go through the doors and go to the right side. Breakfast will be available to students in both the middle school multi-purpose room as well as the high school cafeteria. The space will have a reception area where students can check in the morning. There will be handicapped accessible ramp there you'll see running along the side of the auxiliary gym as well. This is basically a drawing of what it will look like from the exterior. You'd be standing in the parking lot looking at it. Right now, that's what it would look like. I'm going to show you some interior views. This is one interior view. This is looking towards the auxiliary gym. You can see the doors there that would go into the gyms. Oops, went way too far. This is another view looking towards the other side of the, this is basically the wall where the maintenance shop is. And another view. Now pay attention, you can see on either side of the reception center, there's the black panels. We're trying to figure out what we want to do there. Originally, we had some display cases. We felt display cases were kind of old school and kind of dust collectors. So we kind of envisioned this being a multimedia panel display where you could have them interacting together as one display or playing different videos or different things on each one of them. And this is just an example of something that you could do with that space. This is from another entrance, so you could do something like this, or you could do an aquarium or a water feature or play athletics or play the play or whatever it might be going on there, morning announcements and things like that. Way too far. Okay, moving to the design of the addition. We have here the first floor plan, which is the science wing and the science labs. On the first floor, we will have 5 science rooms, 4 of them labs. One would be a physics, a bio, a biochem, a chemistry, and then an environmental science room. And these are all obviously brand new, all state-of-the-art type of equipment, and they're currently being designed as we speak. We've worked with our science department to get what their needs are, and it's going to be a nice space for our high school science classes. The second floor plan is the expansion of the middle school. So on this, you could see moving left to right, a special education classroom, a music room, an art room, the nurse's office, and then the main office. And then there's also a conference room on the opposite wall, or opposite side of the hallway. The main office layout provides a nurse's office, a principal's office, a staff workroom, staff bathrooms, a conference room, as well as another small office for a counselor.
Thank you.
So now we're going to go into some exterior views of the building. If you recall outside, you saw some of the older versions and mock-ups that we had of the early designs back in, I don't know, over a year ago, I guess. So that's, you know, let me turn the lights off. You can see there that this would be the, looking at it from basically the Loop or from Monroe Avenue, depending on how far back you are. That's what that's this vision. You'd have the entranceway, entrance doors there, and then you could actually see some of the science furniture, and on their first floor. Above it would be the main office to the middle school. This is an example of what the lobby would be. First of all, if you could see that vertical element to the left where the David is going in, so that's basically a metal material, panel material. What we tried to do there was bring that exterior element through the building, and you can see it going through the building towards the elevator shaft, the elevator shaft is in wood there. Try to bring in some of the school colors on the one wall, and as well as the stairwell.
Vince, the last we spoke, you said we were gonna see if we can move that wall element on the exterior to the left, so it is flush with that interior wall by the stairs?
Scott, did we ever confirm that was the case?
Yeah, we haven't done the move yet, but I believe, and Roxanne will correct me if I'm wrong, that we can do that,
Yes.
that it's a flush.
Yes, so it'll look like it's continuous.
Right, okay, cool.
Entering into the space.
Yep,
Yes.
perfect.
Okay.
And I caveated it because the floor plan that you saw,
Says that.
or it still showed the job, but that
Yeah.
is,
Right.
that's a couple days old.
Yes.
Yes, yes. So the answer is yes.
Okay.
That's the opposite wall, that's looking into the middle school office. You can see that the middle school office has a great view of what's going on in that lobby space. Though don't forget, most students will not be entering this way. Students who are coming in late would be entering this way, but most students would be entering in through by the back gym and then making their way up the building from there.
So then that drop-off circle is just for,
Just for kind of emergency drop off, literally parents just dropping off and
but then that's also how the parents would enter the school. If they had a meeting or whatever it was, they would come in that way.
probably we haven't confirmed this with the police, but they're probably in a very limited parking time there. So parents are either gonna have to park in the main office.
But that's the way the parents would come in.
Correct. Oops. Swinging around, now you can see this, see the addition from the soccer field. We have two versions that we're gonna show you tonight with very minor differences, so we'll get into that, but and I'll show you the differences, what we're looking at. Okay, that's straight on. You can see that the centerpiece there is an element, an architectural element that we're trying to project a little contemporary flair to it without little high-tech flair to it, so to speak. Those vertical elements in that center are what they call sunshades. And you can see them a little bit different there, those triangles. And what they look like in reality is something similar to this type of thing. So it's bringing in a different architectural element, as well as it does have some practical values in reducing heat into those upper classrooms, and that's another example of what they would look like. So the differential between the one option and the second option is, I guess the best way to show it is the second slide here, where we get to it, is that in the center section there, you can see the brick element on the bottom. That's something that the committee thought was an option and would want to consider. We're just not sure which one we want to go, which way we want to go. So if you recall, I could do them side by side. So you have the one element there. On the right was the original, I'm sorry, on the left is the original without the brick, and on the right it's the with the brick. Any comments on that?
I like it without the brick, it's cleaner to me. If you're asking.
Yeah, we've been kicking this around. Obviously, this is multiple times, the committee has met and changed the whole look of the whole presentation. This is kind of where we landed, and the decision has to be made about this brick or not, the brick on the bottom is basically where we left it, so we were not 100% in agreement either on the brick or.
And those blues, are those two different blue choices, like the darker and the lighter?
No, actually,
Okay.
the blue, it will be the darker blue. So if you go back,
Yeah, no, I just thought maybe that was like a different.
yeah, it was just an older version. We didn't get the Pantone colors to them. That's gonna be see the darker blue on the left, that's gonna be the darker blue that's in that center. So this is, once again, this is a larger picture of it without the brick. And let me go to the, way too far. And with the brick.
I think aesthetically, I like the without the brick better as well.
This doesn't
and
look
just-
weird with no, if there's brick on the left, brick on the bottom, but no brick on the right. That's what makes it look strange to me.
Our only thing about that, we like it both ways, but we thought maybe, do you think it looks too industrial when I have the brick? I mean, I could go either way,
Oh, 'cause you've
that
got
was
the-
just the one thing.
You've got the bricks,
Yeah,
parts of the building
like that.
bookending it. The one in the middle is just something else
That's
to
fine, I mean,
get
we
dirty.
just, I mean, majority, whatever you guys want, whatever you think, we could kind of make a decision on that.
God, hey clickers. Anyway.
You know, one day I like the brick, one day I don't like the brick, you know what I mean?
Is there a
So-
reason why it's not on the bright side like the brick, like why it's on the left and the bottom and not on the right?
Well,
I think
originally we
that's
had it
the-
all
That's the
brick,
building.
but you couldn't match the brick and the colors to
Yeah.
the old part of the school. So
Yeah.
matching the bricks would look just terrible.
Yeah.
So we ended up with this middle piece,
Yeah,
like that.
if you look at the transition from the original design to where we wound up, it went from the original design, which had similar structures to this, but they were a little more disjointed, which gave the committee at that felt like it was like, well, you built this addition, then you built a different addition, then you built a third addition, and then you built a fourth addition. So we came up with another design that took care of that, but that one somehow morphed into almost looking identical to the existing building. And the architect's concern was we were going to try to make it look like the existing building, but we would fail because the materials are very different from the 1960s to now. So it would look like, they really didn't do a good job of trying to make it match. So that's when this version came in, which kind of gives it you could clearly see that this was a unified design, but it gives that really, contemporary look to it. Doesn't look like it was built in the 1960s at all, which is good, I think, because it's not built in the 1960s, but it does have some of that traditional style on the right and the left with that nice center that gives it a little bold aesthetic. So, and the brick came into play when we saw this picture, I think, right, Greg?
Yeah.
Yeah. So on a standalone building, that looks cool. The
Yeah.
brick looks good there. But I think when you put it this with the brick on either side, it looks a little disjointed, I think, so.
It looks like a kid's Lego set and he didn't get finished playing, he got
Yeah,
called away.
ran
for
out of
dinner, so-
red,
Ran out of brick
ran out of red,
So,
right? Yeah.
So I guess the majority doesn't wants to go without the brick, right? I'm thinking?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what we'll go with then.
Yeah. The last slide here is just a quick update on the athletic fields, and then I'll talk a little bit about the HVAC project. This is the current design. It is going to be modified. We had to shift some things around the field because of that high jump in the end zone. The high jump pad area is much larger than our existing area by whatever NJSIA regulations call for. So that shifted some things on the field, so, but we're thinking about moving some of the long jumps? What are they? Pole vault and,
Move to the,
yeah,
behind the other end zone.
on the other end zone to make things match a little better. We theoretically could put a softball field on there, but we don't think we are. Don't really have the true need for it. If the softball field wanted to practice on there, on a bad rainy day, they could, but, you know, our
There
field,
would be no dirt though, right?
there'd be no dirt,
Yeah, I was
yeah.
gonna say that.
So you'd have, well, they do play, they
do
Well, a
have
lot of
a
fields
grass
don't have,
field.
Yeah. So, so they could practice out there, just like baseball could practice out there, but it would interfere with track. So that was one of the reasons why we said, you know what, let's just not deal with it. So the next version will not probably have a softball field on it. So that's where we are.
So it remains track, football, and soccer.
Track, football, soccer. Yes. The final piece is we had a bid opening the
Vince,
other.
can I just go back just before you start the HVAC? Just, I know one of the questions that I had, and I think the finance, you know, we're getting all these new science labs and everything, and the one thing we did ask was, that 2 years from now or 3 years when that building is built, what we're putting in there as of today is not gonna be obsolete. And then you're gonna come back here and saying, well, you know, we need this, this, and this because this is new. And I don't know, maybe our experts could help us with that, or, I mean, we have enough upgrades or enough technical advances in there to say that 2 years from now when the building's built, that we're not gonna be behind already. So, that's my concern, and I don't know how you make that happen, or what we could put in there to make sure that we're not gonna be behind before we even get started. So, I mean, if you could, I think maybe some of the other people have an interest in that too, so.
Yeah. I mean, the folks who are designing Longo Labs are designing it, they design industrial labs, they design, you know, so that's, you know, as far as the lab components of it, how it's being taught.
I'm not worried about I understand the teachings, but
Well,
I'm
yeah,
just
but
worried about
that's
the
that's
components of the
changing. For
cost,
example,
yeah.
we were demoing, what are those called, those, X-Space, Z-Space, which does these amazing, three-dimensional, graphics of dissecting. You could split about a heart and watch it, you know, that's where the technology's going, if anywhere. So it's really technologically driven as opposed to really labs, but I mean, science to me needs to be hands-on.
I agree, there's gotta be some type of old school in there, right?
But we have that flexibility, so.
Okay, I'm sorry, if, you know,
yeah.
you and Kyle and our professionals and our experts say that it's gonna be okay, then
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
Mobility also
Yes,
in the labs.
right,
Okay,
The furniture that's being selected, so things can be moved
Correct.
around.
okay,
correct. Similar to what we
Right.
did in our STEM room, things could be pushed aside so they could have, different
you know,
capabilities.
sometimes I've been on this board for 15 years now, sometimes we've done stuff and then by the time it gets going, it's like, okay, it's not good anymore, you know,
Yeah.
so. I just wanna make sure before we spend the taxpayers' money, we're forward, I guess, is the word. Thank you.
So the other day, we had the bid opening for package 2, which was the HVAC project. It didn't go as well as we'd liked it to go. It did come in a bit over budget. So we have been doing some work with our construction manager and our architect to determine why. We had a meeting this morning. Some of the reasons why are some of the things we talked about during the budget hearing. Some of the not only the supply chain issues, but some of the labor issues, whether it be electrical contractors, not of the availability, lack of availability of electrical contractors willing to do the work. In fact, 3 out of the 4 low bids all had to use the same electrical contractor. So right there, that number was the same throughout, so they give us any wiggle room. We're also looking at readjusting the current bid proposal that we put out didn't have any real shift space or swing space, which allows them to do work on first shift as opposed to overtime shift. And the way that would work, it would most likely be in the high school where we could say to them at any given time, you have 5 classrooms that you can use, that you could come in during the school year and work on those 5 classrooms and do those 5 classrooms, and then the following 2 weeks later, they go to another 5, and it'll be all during the day as opposed to that night shift, which would save us some money. So there are other things. We're looking at the scope. We're looking at shifting of things. So there are some things. We're pretty confident that when we go out to bid next time, we'll get much closer to that number. So just wanted to update you. We were planning on awarding that on May 8th, but it looks like we'll be more than likely proposing rejecting the bids resolution as opposed to accepting the bid resolution. Okay?
Can I ask one question? So with the referendum, I know certain things are targeted. So if this HVAC is gonna cost us more money because of these bids and prices and everything, do we have room to shift it from one spot to another to make up that money? Or are we just locked into the football field is locked in and
No,
labs are locked in?
you're allowed to shift it, but you don't want to shift it
I'm not saying that, but if we have to.
Basically then you're changing your scope, and your what you originally wanted to do. So we're looking at certain things that, we might have said, well, while we're doing this, let's do this. That wasn't necessarily in the original scope.
Right. But if it's gonna cost us, I just didn't know where, like, if it's gonna cost us, let's say, an extra $250,000 or $200,000 to do this, like, how's that gonna come about? So, but we could discuss that.
Well, that's why I'm not prepared to pull the trigger on the first
I
bid
agree.
to go over budget.
I agree. I was just trying to do for my own
Okay, if it was
education.
if it was the alterations, that might be a different story.
Okay.
And we knew exactly that, package number 3 or 2 came in at, less, then we do have more flexibility.
I'm
Or
good.
package number 1 comes in, that's where, but I'm not willing to, at this point, jeopardize the big package until I know
Understandable. Okay.
exactly where our finances are.
Okay, thank you.
Correct?
Makes sense.
Okay. All right. That's all I got. Okay?
Anybody questions or concerns before we open up the meeting for comment? Okay, can I have a motion, please, to open up the meeting to the public for a comment?
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, motion made by Mr. David, second by Mr. Ferrero. All those in favor of opening the meeting to the public, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, motion is carried. The meeting is now open to the public. Mr. Ganell?
Seeing no one, I make a motion to close the meeting to the public.
Second.
Okay. Motion made by Mrs. Zimmerman, seconded by Mr. David. All those in favor of closing the meeting to the public, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, motion's carried. Meeting is now closed to the public for comment. Mr. Ladati, do you want to just read the resolutions or before we vote, or? We don't have to, it's up to you,
Yeah, I don't
whatever.
think you want to read those. Those are
No,
long.
these are.
Yeah, no, I didn't know if you wanted to
Well,
mention
you
anything.
could read the titles of the 3.
Yeah, if you want to
Yeah.
do that. If not, if you're comfortable, we can go to roll call.
Resolution number 1 is final budget adoption. Resolution, first 2. Resolution 2 is supplemental stabilization aid, and number 3 is proposed school facility projects.
Yeah. Anybody else, before we vote, any questions, comments? Okay.
Do any of those resolutions need to be voted on separately? No? Okay. Biner.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Ferrara.
Yes.
Haberthur.
Yes.
Ladati.
Yes.
Tiers.
Yes.
Zimmerman.
Yes.
Panici.
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Excellent. Do we have any, go into closed session?
Yes.
Yes.
Motion to go into closed session?
Second.
Okay, motion made by Mr. David, seconded by Mrs. Tiers. All those in favor of going into closed session, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Night, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ganala, do you want to read the,
Yes, I do.
right, thank you.
Be it resolved by the Board of Education, the Board of Education meet in private session from which the public shall be excluded to discuss the topics of KEA negotiations, which private discussion is being held pursuant to Section 7B and 8 of the Open Public Meetings Act. The matters under discussion will be disclosed to the public as soon as final decisions are made and voted upon. Okay. Biner?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Ferrara?
Yes.
Haberthur?
Yes.
Ladati?
Yes.
Tiers?
Yes.
Zimmerman?
Yes.
Panici?
Yes.
Okay, we're in closed session.
Okay.
Bruno?